38M, a construction project manager, have been married to my wife, 36F, for 10 years. We have 2 kids, both young enough not to understand the storm that was about to tear through our lives. I won't lie, marriage had its ups and downs, but I never suspected this. It all started when I noticed a recurring charge on our joint credit card: groceries, utilities, and gas purchases linked to a location 2 hours away. At first, I thought it was some mistake. Maybe my wife had used the wrong card during a day trip. But when I checked the dates, they were too frequent. My gut told me to dig deeper. We own a vacation home in that area, a cabin I had personally renovated, poured sweat and money into over the years. It was meant to be a family retreat, a place for us to escape the stress of daily life. We hadn't been there in months, or so I thought. One Friday afternoon, I told my wife I had a work trip. Instead, I drove straight to the cabin, and that's when my entire world cracked open. Her car was parked outside. A second car, a beat-up sedan I didn't recognize, was next to it. The lights inside were on. My hands shook as I unlocked the door, but I didn't even get to step inside before I heard voices. A man's voice. Her voice. I stood there listening, every word burning into my brain. They were laughing. She had moved him in. Not some fling, not some one-night mistake. She had made our vacation home into their love nest. And she thought I wouldn't notice. I didn't storm in right away. I wanted to, but I knew that an emotional outburst wouldn't get me what I wanted: revenge, justice, and complete control over the situation. So, I stepped back, took a deep breath, and started recording on my phone. If I was going to divorce her, I needed proof. I walked around the side of the house, peeking through the windows. My wife sat on the couch, laughing, wine glass in hand. Across from her, him, a guy in his late 30s, scruffy, wearing my hoodie. My hoodie, that set something off inside me. Not only was this guy sleeping with my wife, but he was also making himself comfortable in my space, wearing my things. I pressed record and walked inside. The second my wife saw me, the color drained from her face. Her affair partner, let's call him AP, looked confused at first, then pissed. Like I was the one invading their space. "Hey, honey," I said, my voice deceptively calm. "Nice place you got here." "What are you doing here?" my wife stammered, placing her wine glass down like she had just been caught stealing. I ignored her and looked at AP. "Who the hell are you?" Instead of looking guilty, he had the nerve to roll his eyes. "Man, listen, I don't know what she told you, but..." "Shut up," I cut him off. I turned my attention back to my wife. "So, this is what you've been doing while I was working my ass off? Moving your boyfriend into our vacation home?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. She knew there was no talking her way out of this. "Get out," I said. She blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get out. Both of you." AP chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, you don't own this place. You can't just kick us out." That's when I smiled. Because, oh yes, I could. "You really think that?" I pulled my phone out and pressed play on the recording. Their laughter, their conversation, her saying how much nicer it was to be here without me. I watched as my wife's face twisted into panic. "Don't do this," she whispered. I stepped closer. "You moved your boyfriend into my house, used my money, and thought I wouldn't notice?" My voice dropped lower. "You've already done this, sweetheart. I'm just finishing it." And with that, I pulled the ace up my sleeve, the new set of locks I had brought with me. I pulled the new locks from my bag and held them up. "Since you've been so comfortable here, I figured it was time for a little home security upgrade," I said, grinning. "Wouldn't want any intruders." My wife paled. "You can't do that." I tilted my head. "Funny. Pretty sure I can." See, what she didn't realize was that the cabin was in my name only. We had bought it after marriage, but because I used an inheritance from my grandfather to pay for it outright, I made sure it was legally mine. I checked the deed that morning just to be sure. "I live here," AP scoffed. "You can't just..." "You don't live here," I shot back. "You were squatting in my house. That ends now." I stepped outside, locked the front door with the spare key I had brought, and then calmly removed the entire lock cylinder while they watched, stunned. AP lunged toward me, but I pulled a crowbar from my bag. "You really want to try that?" I said, gripping it tight. He stopped dead. My wife, now realizing the full weight of what was happening, started begging. "Please," she whispered. Let's talk about this. Talk. I laughed. Like how you talked to me while screwing some loser in my house? I shook my head. Nah, you had your chance. I tossed their bags outside. Take your things. You're trespassing now. She glared at me, switching tactics. I have rights. I smirked. No, you don't. Not here. Then, I pulled out my phone. I had already called the sheriff's office before I even stepped inside. Trespassing. Unauthorized occupancy. Squatters don't have rights in a primary-owned vacation home. I made sure to check. 5 minutes later, a deputy arrived. My wife and AP tried everything. He's locking me out of my own home, she cried. The deputy glanced at me. Who's on the deeds? I handed over the paperwork. The deputy barely glanced at it before turning back to them. This is his house, he said flatly. You have 10 minutes to leave before I remove you myself. My wife's face twisted in pure hatred. AP tried one last time to act tough. Man, this is messed up. Not as messed up as you wearing my hoodie in my house while screwing my wife, I shot back. Now get the hell out. They left, humiliated. I stood on the porch, watching as they drove away. Then I changed the locks. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed at the cabin, drinking a beer on the porch, thinking about my next move. Throwing them out was just the beginning. I wanted to make sure she lost everything she took for granted. The next morning, I drove straight to my lawyer's office. I wasn't just filing for divorce. I was going for the jugular. Adultery? In my state, that gave me the upper hand in the division of assets and spousal support. Full custody of the kids? She had been sneaking off to the cabin with AP instead of being home. That made her an unfit parent in court's eyes. Finances? I froze our joint accounts before she could drain them and open new ones in my name only. The house? I had proof she hadn't contributed to the mortgage in years. That meant she had no claim. I served her the divorce papers within 48 hours. She showed up at my office, screaming, "You're ruining my life," she shrieked. I folded my arms. "No, you did that." She started bargaining. "We can work this out." I laughed in her face. "You really think I'd stay with you after you moved another man into our home?" That's when she snapped. "You're a piece of crap. You think you're better than me?" Legally, I smirked. Yeah, the final blow. The court proceedings were brutal. My lawyer tore her apart. She tried to argue she should keep the house. Denied. She demanded joint custody. Denied. She asked for alimony. Laughed out of court. The judge sided with me on every count. The kicker? AP bailed on her after realizing she had nothing left. Turns out he was unemployed and had been living off her. When she lost everything, so did he. Now, she's living in a tiny apartment, working a dead-end job, and begging to see the kids. I let her, but only under strict conditions. Supervised visitation only. As for me, I'm thriving. New house. More time with my kids. No dead weight dragging me down. If there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Don't cheat. And definitely don't try to play house in a home that isn't yours. Oh, and if you enjoyed this story, subscribe. Unlike my ex, I won't betray you.